Hi, and welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. Today's guest is another new Instagram friend, and his name is Nathaniel Hodder-Shipp. He's the president and founder of Breathwork for Recovery and has worked as a professional healer for almost a decade. Using an arsenal of techniques with a special focus on breathwork, Nathaniel has helped thousands of people process trauma, disarm negative thought patterns, and maintain healthy and happy relationships with themselves and loved ones. Please enjoy my interview with Nathaniel. Hello, Nathaniel.
Hi, how are you doing, Sarah?
I'm actually kind of awesome today. How are you?
Not too shabby. Just finished my morning coffee, ready to rock the day.
Yes, very awesome. Well, welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. We are very happy to have you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be on with you folks today.
Yeah. So I think it's super funny since I've started this podcast. I have made more friends on Instagram than I thought was like even possible. I feel like a millennial must feel, I would imagine. Cause yeah, I think I saw your stuff on Instagram. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
I stalked you and was like, hey, you seem cool. Be on my podcast.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what happened.
Not creepy at all, right?
Hey, not creepy at all. I don't like Instagram so much. I mean, social media in general, it's just like a giant loop reflector of all your own beliefs being shown right back at you.
Right.
So, and then there's just the weird thing about like managing an account and all that nonsense, and like, I don't know, it gets weird. I just put it up there because I want to build a community and support people, and that really seemed like what you were doing too.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of, yeah, I kind of look at it as a necessary evil, but
yeah,
here we are. So would you mind telling folks a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So yeah, my name's Nathaniel Hodder-Shipp. Sometimes you'll find me as Nathaniel V. Dust on the internet. I don't know what the hell to do about that. But yeah, I am the president and founder of Breathwork for Recovery, and what we do is utilize a breathwork technique to help people find resolution to their trauma. And so we kind of have three different prongs of approach that we do. We work inside of treatment centers, helping people find healing inside of treatment centers when they've checked in for substance use disorders or eating disorders, or maybe it's an adolescent program. And then we run weekly support groups called the Recovery Circle, and we do those for just a small donation that is not really mandatory. In fact, it's usually an aside. At the end of the group, we'll be like, oh, if you brought your donation, great. Put the $5 in the basket. If you didn't, don't worry about it. Have a beautiful night. Because we've noticed that there isn't really a transition of care from treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And so people don't have access to breath work outside of it, or if they do, it's expensive. And then the franchise communities don't have access or don't even know what the hell breathwork is. So we wanted to make it accessible to everybody, regardless of their socioeconomic status, their race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, sex, any of that stuff. So those are ongoing every week. We run 2 in Los Angeles, and then Monday we start in Brooklyn, and then we have one going on in Tucson. And ideally, we're expanding down into San Diego and up into Portland, relatively soon. And then we also are really excited about offering training for clinicians. So what we want is breath work to be given to clients in its most ethical form. And
yes.
So in order for that to happen, we want the right people to be trained. We want people who have mental illness training, who understand trauma and how to work with trauma, because at the end of the day, breath work is a trauma modality, and so we want people trained correctly and in the right hands, because we watch a lot of folks that get sober or find real passion with breath work, and then they're like, oh, I'm going to go and do this inside of treatment centers, and they don't have any real training.
Mm-hmm.
They treat it as sort of like a yoga modality, and while it is a pranayama yoga technique, descending from India, it's a hell of a lot more than that. So.
Right. I mean, I think I told you over email just a little bit about like one experience I had with breath work, and it was so interesting to me because I know breath work has been calling me for years, and my issue with anxiety is that when I get super anxious, I find that I hold my breath. Mm-hmm. And so I know there's something with the lungs that I need to be moving, and I did a day workshop of breath work, and I had the most intense experience, and then when I left, it felt like I had slept for the night and then woke up and it was a new day. It was the weirdest thing and so powerful.
Yeah, it can definitely do some strange things, and time and space get a little wonky when you start working with the breath, for sure.
So I'd love to hear the path that led you to this point, because I'm guessing there is some, personal connection to all of these different communities. So how'd you get here?
Well, that's a good question. I would say for me, I struggled with substance use disorders myself, so I was polysubstance use. I really enjoyed methamphetamine. It was whiskey that almost took my life. And I attempted suicide a few times, and I'm a survivor of that, thank goodness. But in my darkest period, I realized that I needed help. I had been talking to my work-appointed therapist because I had basically burned everything that I had down to the ground. So the therapist was like, Nathaniel, in the 25 years I've been doing this work, you're the worst case I've ever seen. And I was like, oh.
Wow.
I'm like, I'm 27 years old. How is this possible?
Wow.
So, yeah, I checked into treatment about a week after that and thought that I was ready to go and wanted healing. And it turns out that, as I'm sure you know, it's like it doesn't really matter how much you want it. It's about the willingness to do the work. So I was really skeptical of anything they were doing, and they brought this person named Corey Boris in to do this breathwork stuff, and she was talking about self-love and burnt sage, and I was like, this is some dumb hippie crap right here.
Awesome. You can say shit, by the way.
Oh,
I mark all these explicit because there's no way I can't cuss.
Okay, thank God.
Right.
I already said hell. I was like, I better ask if I can say shit.
Oh, right. Yeah, I meant to say that. Yeah, sorry. Cuss away.
Cuss away. Excellent. So I was like, yeah, what is this dumb hippie shit? And she led us through this breathwork practice, and I was like, all right, well, I may as well do it. I'm here, and I participated, and I had such a profound experience that after the group, I was like, oh my God, Corey, how do I learn about this stuff? So she connected me to my now mentor, David Elliott, who does a lot of training out here in Los Angeles, and so I've been working with him last 8.5 years or so, intimately with the breath. And a little while after I got sober, it was probably about a year, I started working into treatment centers and bringing this. It was sort of I wouldn't call it a donation. It was more like I just wanted to come in and serve the people that were there. So I ran groups, a couple of times a month, and then I've just watched it change a lot of lives. So throughout the years of me working with this, I've developed an apprenticeship program, and Breathwork for Recovery is kind of an extension of that, and getting people trained to do the work in an ethical way. And then really just watching the treatment industry as it stands now, and watching it with such dismay at how we are doing treatment, and how it really bums me out. And so breathwork is one of the things that also I watch. Much of the community is, it's available to people with privilege, and that's great, that's fine, but I don't see very many people of color coming in and doing the work and having access to the work or knowing what it is, and that just feels like such a great disservice. So I want breathwork in the hands of the people that need it most, and it's usually the people who don't have access to it who need it. So I want to create that space for people to have access to it, because if we're not working with everybody, there's no point in doing the work.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because I think the whole field of yoga, breathwork, the self-actualization part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is often only available to white people of means. And some of my friends and I were talking about the challenges. If you are a person who can't get your basic needs met, then for us to be like, oh yeah, just go do some yoga or go meditate or do some breath work when they don't even have a space to call their own is also kind of a privileged position for us to be putting on them. So I think it's such a huge challenge. And I love when I see there are a couple organizations that will take meditation into schools and have the kids do it in school, because that they're captive they're captive there, and have a safe space if everybody's practicing together. So I wish we could do more of that, because I think that's where it starts.
Yeah, absolutely. We are not treating addiction very well in this country at all. It all stems,
Amen.
to me, in my observation, about the unresolved trauma that we have as a society
Yes.
approaching this in a correct way. So, of course, people are going to reach outside of themselves for relief, because when you find something that regulates your nervous system, all
Yep.
of a sudden, wow, I feel great. Well, of course you do, because you've had a dysregulated nervous system your whole life. Pain pills are going to do the trick. It's kind of a sad thing, and we really need to give children, adolescents, the opportunity to learn how to regulate their emotions and deal with issues
Mm-hmm.
so that they're not beholden to addiction when they start experimenting with drugs and alcohol.
Right. Exactly. And I think you're so dead on with the nervous system. We just opened an IOP, and that's something that, people were asking. So, if you're going to be a trauma informed program, what does that mean? And I said, I'm going to help people understand what their nervous system feels like and how they know when they're dysregulated. And with one of our people the other night, we did this really great exercise where, like, I was just kind of getting close to him and asking him if it was okay. And I could feel his body saying no, even though his head was saying yes. And so we took
Right.
about half an hour to experience, like, what does it actually mean when your body and your nervous system is inviting something versus pushing it away? How do you bypass your brain, overriding the, it should be okay for this person to sit next to me? And he's like, people have been telling me to get in my body for years, and I had no idea what that meant. Now I get it. And I'm like, yay, we did it! Which I'm sure we haven't solved his addiction, but that's such a huge light bulb,
Yeah, it's really a remarkable thing when people can begin to feel what it's like to be in their body. And that was exactly, for me, why I love breathwork so much, because it was like, for the first time I was in my body since I don't know when, and it was like, oh my God, this is what this flesh and bone thing feels like. Wow, this is incredible. This isn't so bad. Wow, huh. Of course, this isn't going to be everyone's experience with their own body, but for me, it was pretty miraculous. And I love to hear that that's the kind of work you're doing, is giving people an opportunity to just get in their body.
Yeah. So for people who are listening who are like, what the fuck is breath work? What's your elevator speech for what breath work is?
So breathwork is a simple technique. There's a lot of different breathwork techniques, and breathwork is usually going to be an umbrella term to describe many different pranayama yoga techniques. So a lot of it's going to be breathing through the nose, the breath of fire, alternate nostril breathing, and all that stuff. That they often will just call that breathwork. So this technique is a two-stage breath, and it's done lying down through the mouth. And essentially what's happening is you're quieting the mind long enough for you to have an experience of what it's like in your body. So you're breathing, you're putting more oxygen in, you're pushing the carbon dioxide out, so there's that lovely gas exchange that goes on, which most people, we don't have enough oxygen running through our body anyway because we're not breathing correctly.
Yep.
Then we're building vagal tone and allowing, essentially how I break that down is like giving person power to have control over their heart rate, which you're taking control of your autonomic nervous system. So just slow that heart rate down, and so many things will follow. So that's going to happen. And at the end of the day, what we're doing is bringing people from the stages of freeze, from fight or flight response, into the social engagement system and getting the social engagement system back on. So we're kind of peeling away the layers of the traumatic body.
Amazing. It's so funny to me. Well, not funny. I guess it's just really interesting that, breath work and yoga and meditation, all of these techniques, A, they're free, and B, they are thousands of years old. And us white Westerners thought we were like, no, science and and we're going to figure out all these things. And it comes back to all of these ancient practices are actually we have the tools. We don't need anything outside of self.
Yeah, that is something that's really beautiful. It's a shame that we've kind of just cast aside these things and done what we have done with these modalities like meditation and breath work. They're really helpful, and the research is really clear about breath work and meditation and how useful it is for people struggling with trauma and PTSD and depression.
Yeah, when new clinicians, because I teach as well, and when new clinicians ask, what is it that I should be learning? I'm like, something somatic. I don't care what it is, but that is where the field is heading. And, you mentioned earlier, we're doing addiction wrong. I think the thing that I realized, so my business partner had read in a book, I can't remember what it was, but that patients don't need an explanation, they need an experience. And so that's what we're trying to offer in treatment, because addiction is not a prefrontal cortex disease. And for us to be lecturing and giving psychoeducation, that's not actually helping anything.
Yeah, that's the experience I've witnessed working in treatment for as long as I have, is that the top-down stuff isn't always as useful. I think it's a nice compliment as long as people are in their bodies, but if you're not in your body, then all of that stuff, you're not able to retain the information or learn.
Right.
It's all about somatic work, whether that's whatever bottom-up method you want to go to. I don't care what it is, just start doing it. And I tell my clients a lot, if we're not treating trauma, we're not really treating addiction. We're just putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound for you folks.
I'm curious in your experiences, because I could certainly share mine with you, but have you experienced a client who says, I don't have any trauma? And I guess, how do you work with that, and how do you open people up to the idea of some of their ordinary life experiences have actually been traumatic?
Yeah, I think the way that I phrase it, a wonderful clinician kind of put it this way to me one time, and I was like, oh, that's genius, I'm going to use that. And she basically said that trauma is going to be different for everybody, and so maybe I bump my knee on a coffee table and I get away from it just fine, but someone else bumps their knee on the coffee table and they're bruised for the next 3 weeks and hobbling around. So I kind of phrase it in that way, like, I don't get to decide what is traumatic to you, and not necessarily do you either. Your nervous system is the one that makes up the decision whether to become dysregulated or not due to the traumatic event. And it could be something as simple as a little bit of bullying that goes on. Fender bender can be considered traumatic. You know, you break your leg and you don't resolve that, that can be traumatic. But so many of us are just conditioned to believe that this normal functioning in society is okay. The example that comes to mind to me was just, I was leading a group about shame yesterday, and we were talking about things, and they were talking about disciplining their child and how there's a big difference between a spanking and abuse. And I was like, well, the nervous system isn't really going to distinguish between those two things, and kind of broke it down. And it's just so fascinating how normalized we are to violence. I mean, it's just like, that's okay to, you know, I kind of explained, like, if you're going to put hands on someone, regardless of whether it's discipline or not, like, there's something wrong with your nervous system. Probably you're a little dysregulated, because if you jump to violence from this place of fear or anger, well, yeah, we might want to take a look at that. So I kind of try and frame it as, like, I don't get to decide what's traumatic, and some of us may just, you know, talk about these normal life situations which our nervous system is going to interpret as traumatic.
Yeah, I think that's the key, right? Is that it's your body that has decided, and that it sounds like a conversation we were having with our group last night about family of origin stuff, you know, and divorce in families, and our patients saying like, oh, well, you know, the divorce didn't bother me, or it's not that big of a deal that I don't talk to one of my parents. And I'm like, yeah, you think that, but how are you feeling inside? And, you know, I remember my brother's experience of, our parents got divorced when I think I was probably 8, and so he must have been 5. And it was traumatic just based on the way that our parents were interacting through the whole thing. And if I really think about what my little nervous system was doing at that time, I felt completely unsafe. So I always kind of categorized that as a traumatic event. And my brother didn't until like 2 years ago, and finally recognized what a terrible experience that was, even though on the outside or on paper, you know, someone might not say like, oh, that was traumatic, but we felt wholly unsafe. And at that age, it is a survival thing. If your parents are not there for you, you literally could die because you can't fend for yourself.
Yeah, such a fascinating thing. Again, we just normalize these situations where it's like, yeah, that is a pretty normal occurrence. And also, as a child, the impact that it has on you is severe. We just kind of ignore it. It's like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm fighting this giant machine when it comes to that, right? Because it's not just, that's just not in the addiction industry. That's everywhere.
Yeah, it's our entire society. We haven't addressed any of the issues that need addressing, and really, the SAMHSA website even lists like to be trauma-informed care, you've got to address the issues of gender, sex, sexual orientation, race, religion, all of that stuff to be truly trauma-informed. And
Mm-hmm.
we in the United States have not really addressed colonization. We haven't
Right.
addressed, that we've pretty much been a nation at war since its inception, and we haven't addressed these issues, so of course we're going to be dysregulated and traumatized. And it's coming to a head now where we've developed these drugs that it's so easy to access anything that you want. Of course we're going to take that route because we haven't dealt with our issues. And as a society, until we confront that and talk about race and talk about discrimination, talk about bias, and do the work from that perspective, we're going to get turned up by this machine. I feel that quite a bit myself there, Sarah. I'm glad to hear that I'm not alone in that.
Yeah. So before we get into this, I do want to acknowledge that we are two white people
Yes.
having this discussion, and I will absolutely own my privilege in this. But a thing that I've been really thinking about in like what is my contribution to issues of race, and what I see with white people who don't admit their racism due to, like, we live in a culture of white supremacy, I think that it comes down to shame. And what I know about shame is the person who is experiencing shame needs empathy in order to make a connection to that shameful thing. And I'm trying to figure out how to leverage my experience as a white person and give space for other white people to say, I'm racist, because we are inherently, even if that's not what we think, it's because we continue to participate in this culture. And I can empathize with why that would be hard for other people to admit. It's been the last couple of years, things that I've been really thinking about and really recognizing, holy shit, I am racist. And I want to be clear to listeners that I'm not saying that with pride. I'm saying that with authenticity of recognition of my shadow side, right? So I feel like there's so much work that needs to be done in the realm of shame to make more space for white people to essentially come out of the closet in admitting racism and how we contribute to it.
Yeah, I like that perspective quite a bit. It's important that I feel like if we can check our privilege and to own the inherent bias that we all have as human beings, and especially in the culture that we exist in when we're contributing to white supremacy, and how much more opportunity I've had because my name is Nathaniel and because I'm a white male and all of those issues, and to say, look, I bias. Like, I grew up in Utah and I didn't meet a person of color for many years till I was, I think, in junior high, and I
Wow.
became friends with a lovely gentleman, and it was just such a fascinating thing and then to realize, like, oh my God, my entire life has been this contribution to racism, to sexism, even on my part. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Check that stuff and say, hey, look, it's not that I'm this intentional being going out there and doing these things. It's that
Right.
I have lacked awareness my entire life about these issues. And for me to say, yeah, you know what, I have this bias and I need to check it and I need to be aware of it and I need to help other people come to that awareness as well so that we can provide healing for ourselves and for everyone else.
And it really is this cultural wound of, colonization. Like, literally from day one, my husband was telling me something, I can't remember what it was, but the other day, he was talking about, I think, Guatemala, because he was just there, and just different ways that white people have just, like, literally all we've done is come in and take shit from other cultures. And it's just, like, I just can't even believe how power has motivated. No wonder we're at this place where we define success in a monetary and power dynamic sort of way, because this is literally what's been going on for centuries.
Yeah, it's fascinating. That's pretty much all we've done. And even in that space, I have to really check myself and the origins of breathwork and make sure that I give, like, hey, this is going to be a technique that generally they have their roots in India and the traditions that live there. And yeah, I think it's an important discussion that we have because if we don't address these issues, then we're firstly not providing trauma-informed care for the people that are in our care, and then we're not resolving our own issues and not providing a safe place for ourselves and the healing that needs to occur for us to be the best that we can be.
Mm-hmm. Who knew we were going to talk about racism today? Love it.
Yeah. I think you have to. If we're gonna have a conversation about healing trauma, I think that it's people a disservice by not discussing it.
Yeah. So speaking of healing, maybe let's shift into the discussion of the word healer. So when you think of that word, how does it apply to you, if at all? What are your thoughts about it?
So on my business card, I write the Heretic Healer. Heretic Healer.
Ooh.
And I've taken that kind of moniker as kind of like a tongue-in-cheek thing. And the word heresy has the etymological roots are about having a right to choose. So if you're a heretic, you're choosing something else. And it was the Catholic Church, and they're like the Christianity is the only true thing, and the heretics were the ones who believed in the Gospels, Thomas and the Nazis. So heresy is about having the right to choose. And as a healer, I don't necessarily like that. Always had kind of sour taste in my mouth because of just what people have done with that word and the abuse of power that is often there. It's like, oh, I'm a healer. It's like, well, okay. Really, what I want to do is give clients the ability to heal themselves and hold space for them to do the work and for me to just provide a container for the healing to happen. So I don't feel that I necessarily have any healing abilities. I'm just going to be able to hold some space for people to do the healing they need to do and give them choice, give them the power of choice back. Because with trauma robs you from the ability to choose. You can't choose that your nervous system is going to respond in the way that it responds. You don't get to choose once you become addicted to a substance. You don't get to choose the freedom that's there. So to me, it's all about providing choice, giving people back the ability to choose their own healing. So that's what I would say about the word healer.
So it's interesting that it's on your business card, but at the same time, you're like, not sure about how I use that.
Right. Yeah, for sure. It's very paradoxical.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily fit into the mold either of I'm not going to wear these white flowy robes and talk about, I don't know. I'm not going to say, hey, put this rose quartz crystal on your chest. It'll help you open your heart. I'm going to be like, well, we got some work to do and things are fucked up right now. I just want you to be aware of that and let's see what we can accomplish. So I don't necessarily fit into the healer world. And for a lot of the reasons that we talked about just previously before we transitioned to this, a lot of it is just continuing that saga.
Well, I think the healer world is changing, I mean, I find the people that I would call healers or people doing healing work, I think they're more like us. They're tattooed and mohawked and cussing and I think there's a call for a new level of authenticity right now, and I think we're answering that call. So why can't that be a healer? It's just not the historical.
Yeah, I like that quite a bit, and there is a change. There is a resistance that's moving, and I think it is shifting into people. People that are doing the work are starting to reveal themselves more and more, it seems.
I guess this kind of moves us into the wounded healer question, but I find that one can't be a healer unless they are revealing their own wounds.
I think it's an interesting path for people to take, the wounded healer. I don't know if it's something, if I could go back and say, oh yeah, this is definitely what I wanted to choose, was all this pain this lifetime. Something that's been resonating a lot with me lately is the statement that within the cure is always a bit of the poison. And so trauma to me is all about that, right? Because trauma is unconsciously seeking healing out all the time. That's why we find ourselves repeating the same shitty patterns over and over again and dating the same people over and over. Because it's trauma that's in our nervous system is trying to find healing. So for me, that wounding is part of the power that comes to people once you move through. I hate the word mastery is there, I guess I suppose, even though I don't know that I'll ever become a master of anything.
Right.
So the more the answers I find to things, the more questions I have. So the wounded healer is a role that I take very seriously, and at the same time with a little bit of lighthearted tenderness as well. To be able to be aware, and I think this is where it's critical that we become aware of our own wounding, because we're not going to be able to take our clients to the level of healing that they need if we haven't done the work ourselves. So it's walking that razor's edge of, you know what, yes, I am wounded, and to be able to speak to that when my nervous system gets dysregulated in a group and be like, whoa, it's like, hey, this thing's happening to me right now. It doesn't mean I'm immune from it. Or, you know, to be able to take the wisdom that I've gained from my own healing and bring it to other people. I think that that's really the purpose of the healer, is to lighten the darkness a little bit, and to be able to sit in the darkness and to be comfortable with the darkness and say, hey, you're not so bad. You're just darkness.
Right. Right. You know, I love that, you know, you will model that for people in group, because I think that's the other piece of having an experience instead of just teaching someone like, boop, 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 let me tell you what happens when your nervous system is dysregulated. Like, no, let me show you. This is what it looks like. It's funny, I gave a talk last weekend about shame, and someone asked a question. I kind of fumbled with my answer because it wasn't something that I'd answered before. So I was kind of like thinking out loud with it. And then somebody else made a comment and was like, I'm really surprised you said that, you know, and then kind of was a bit judgmental. And my response was, okay, so I'm experiencing shame right now. And let me tell you what that's like for me. And then we can talk about this experience and how the vulnerability that I'm opening up to, like, I'm trying to show you how this works in real time and just being really honest with you. I'm lucky that I've done enough shame work that I know exactly what this is and can model it for you. But that is the wounded healer. That's our job, right? Is to be able to show this is what icky looks like, but this is also what manageable ickiness looks like once you've done the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people, I think, get this idea that you can just heal trauma and then you're done with it and never have to deal with it again. And,
Yeah.
well, we're just creating a new baseline, I think, and reducing the amount of time that you spend in a dysregulated state. So I'm going to become dysregulated, and also I'm going to get so much better at discharging that energy from my nervous system and getting back into a grounded, embodied state. And that's really what trauma healing is about, is because I want my nervous system to light up when I meet a violent client, to let me know that there's the potential for violence. I want to be aware of that and like, oh, okay, this is important information. Or whether it's sexual abuse, or whether it's shame, of course, you know, right? Your nervous system is going to give you so much important information, and really it's about like letting that dysregulation happen and then coming back into a regulated state so much more quickly.
You're smart as fuck, dude. Are you going to write a book or something? Like, I feel like I'm just sitting here, like, you know, my head in my hands, like, just listening. I love it.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah, one day I think I'll write a book. I'm in the middle of some fiction novel right now that I want to finish before moving on to writing about breathwork and trauma. And yeah, it'll come, I think, at some point. I would like that to happen.
I'm also curious because you said that you're working to train other clinicians using breathwork, and I'm guessing that other therapists who might be listening to this are like, me, I want to do it. I want to be trained. So can you share a little bit about what that might look like if people are interested in getting trained?
Yeah, certainly. So my mentor teaches kind of the basis, the foundation of the work a little bit. He wouldn't call himself a clinician. He would just say he's a healer, and a reluctant healer at that. He has developed some training, so we've talked about incorporating some other things around it. So he does the initial trainings, and I teach the first one as well. So I'll teach the first training, which is just breathwork. It's called healer training, oddly enough, if we're talking about healer. How much I hate and love that word. And then I've developed 4 different trainings. There'll be a few more. I'm waiting on the tail end, a few things, because I want to incorporate some racism training into the modules. And I met a gal, and she's going to be leading my team through some racism training, and I want to ideally incorporate that. So it's not ready just yet. I want to finalize a few things. So we're going to align with probably camp, and maybe be NADAC to offer some continuing education for people, so that if you're a therapist or you're a CADC or you're aligned with NADAC, you can get some continuing education hours and then get an overview of what this work looks like in a treatment level, working with clients who have trauma, because this work can dysregulate somebody, and people who have severe sexual abuse trauma can really have some powerful experiences, and they may not like it, they may not even be ready for it, so it's important to be trained. So that's going to be coming out, I think, in the late fall or early spring, and that doesn't mean that you can't take the initial trainings with me already. So if you're interested about that, you can contact me, certainly at breathworkforrecovery.com. You can shoot me an email and be like, hey, I'm interested in this training, would love to learn more. The trainings that I'll be doing with the continuing education, what I'm going to try and do is make them available online too, so you'll be able to attend online, because we live in a virtual world, and I think that there's a lot of great virtual therapy that's going on, and so we want to make it accessible to people as well. So.
Yeah. You are killing it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm really stoked to be on today with you and just learn, from you as well, and the wisdom that you have, because we need more of it, and it's just not out there enough.
Yeah, and that's why I've been so pleasantly surprised and excited by just like randomly meeting people on Instagram who seem to be doing cool things, and to join forces. And even if we don't technically do something together, like we've created this connection that now there's like a cycle of energy that like won't be broken, and it's fucking awesome.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
I know. I want to do everything. I need to clone myself and then like connect all their brains together, because there's literally not enough time to do all the things I feel like I really need to do in this lifetime.
Yeah. There's not.
It sucks.
It does. There's so much cool stuff out there that's going on. Just really rad healing that's happening.
Yeah. I think we can wrap up, because we've been so succinct and excellent in this interview. I'm very impressed with us. But is there anything that we didn't talk about today that you feel like is really important to share with people?
Yeah, I would just say that if you folks are in recovery from mental illness or trauma, substance use disorders, eating disorders, anything like that, which pretty much covers everybody.
Pretty much everyone, yeah. Mm-hmm.
We do run the Recovery Circle, and that is available virtually. So wherever you're at, if you're in the middle and you want to join us, you can join us online, and we'll get folks the link. And you can just find us at breathworkforrecovery.com. And you can just reach out and let us know, hey, I want to join via Skype or whatever, and we'll get you folks connected so that you can do the breathing with us. And our vision is to make this accessible to everybody, regardless of whether they know about it, whether they have the money to do it or not. We just want this work out there in communities. And so if you're interested in breath work and you're in recovery or you need some healing in your life, please just reach out, and we'd love to have you join us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nathaniel. You kick ass.
Yeah, and you do too, Sarah. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much for sticking around to listen to my interview with Nathaniel. As always, you can find more information about him on my website at www.headhearttherapy.com/podcast. Thanks to Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios for editing, to Liam O'Donnell for the awesome album art photo, and to Ben Mueller for our theme music. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.